There we go. Hello, everybody. It's Vivek Patel here from Meaningful Ideas, back for another session. This is session two of Talking to Dads. That's what I call it, Talking to Dads. And we're going to talk about working with our emotions today. I teach parenting. That's what I do full time, pretty much. And when I'm not dancing or making art or doing martial arts or something like that. And my emotional nature is something that from the time I was young, it was always shut down. I was hit when I would cry. I was being hit. I was being punished. I was always told my emotions were something that I had to bury. The only emotion that was kind of acceptable was if I was angry, and I was treated really harshly as a kid. I grew up being spanked a lot and beaten a lot and locked away in my room and punished all the time. And it was really it was very painful in so many ways. I have, as an adult now, I even have so much unprocessed residue from all of that. And not only that, I was also bullied in school. I used to say I was bullied at home and bullied in school. And so I had no safe outlet for my emotions, and I had no one guiding me on that. And so many of us that are raised male, we have that experience where we're not really guided on how to work with our emotions, how to feel our emotions, and how to work with them in a healthy way. And so when my kid came along, my kid was born in 1997, so she's just about to turn 29. Next month she's going to be 29. And so I've been been on this journey for a long time. And when my kid came along, I found that I was yelling a lot and angry a lot, and I was taking it out on my kid all the time. And I hated that because that's not the kind of parent I wanted to be. I wanted to be I wanted to be a kind parent. I wanted to be gentle. I wanted to have patience. I wanted to be a wise guide. This is what I wanted, but that's not what was happening. And I realized that I needed a mind shift and I needed tools so that I could have a mind shift. Because if I didn't have a mind shift, what I ended up having was a mind fuck. And that was not helpful at all. And so all of this stuff was all that residue was being dumped on my kid. And emotions, emotions are such a big part of our lives. They're such a big part of our humanity. And to be fully human means having a relationship with our emotions. So today, I am going to be sharing some theory about emotions, some ideas and concepts, but also some practices that you can actually use in your life that will help you get more in touch with your emotions and learn to work with them in a way where you react less and you respond more, both consciously and unconsciously. Because we don't want to be, when we're acting unconscious, when we're just going off our patterns, that's exactly it. It's the patterns of our past that are taking over, and we're not making conscious choices. And I'll tell you, the patterns of my past are screwed up. They're a big rat's nest full of trauma. When I was in university, I used to volunteer at the radio station. This is like in the 90s, right? And so behind the radio station, there was all these wires that had been there from the 70s, and there was like a whole big rat's nest. Actually called it the rat's nest. You look behind there, and there's only like one engineer who ever touched it because the whole thing would blow apart. And I often think of my mind and my nervous system as that rat's nest because there's so much stuff from my childhood in there and from all the trauma throughout my life. And I didn't want to just let that be. So that's why I went on a journey of personal discovery to try and find out how can I become more in touch with my emotions? How can I undo all those patterns so that I am not dumping them on my kid? And at the same time, I didn't want to repress them. Emotional control, when we talk about emotional control doesn't mean never feeling your emotions and just holding it all in. And this may be like a first level of emotional control and I think some repression is good. If you're going to yell at your kid and you can bite your tongue, that's healthy. But that's not a long-term strategy. It's not sustainable, right? And but emotional control means can we feel the full range of our emotions and then make conscious choices from that so that we're not cut off from our humanity. Not only that, even just personally, I didn't want society and my upbringing and the like kind of the norms of society to stop me from being my full self. And it already had done, so I had to do a whole bunch of rewiring to shift that. And so this is a lot about what we're going to talk about. And it's kind of a way rebelling against society to allow ourselves to feel our emotions and allow ourselves to have that whole part of us be whole and be full. One of my sayings is I searched for my tears for years because I couldn't through most of my life I couldn't cry. And I didn't want that. I didn't want to be blocked like that. I wanted to be free of that. And so part of it is I had to really acknowledge the impact of my past, the impact of my childhood. and the way I was parented. Not to blame my parents, not to make excuses, but more to understand the impact, to understand how my nervous system was impacted, how my relationship with my emotions was impacted, how my relationship to relationships was impacted, and because like I often talk about how as an adult now, it's less so now, thankfully, after years of work, but still, as an adult now, I have a dark cloud of self-condemnation that follows me everywhere I go. And I kind of imagine it like it's a dark cloud and it's like got barbed wire and lightning and it's always it's always following me around. And when I make a mistake, I'm so harsh on myself. It's so bad. I don't like it. I don't want to treat myself that way. I want to believe that I deserve compassion, and I want to believe that every one of you deserves compassion, at least from ourselves, right? If we don't get it anywhere else, I mean, hopefully we do. But even if we don't, at least if we can give ourselves some compassion, and know that we deserve it, especially if we were given the message over and over again that we didn't, I think that's a beautiful thing. Yeah, and so it's worthwhile putting the effort in to do this kind of work, to reconnect with our emotions, or even if you are connected to your emotions and you are doing the work, to continue deepening that, right? Because number one, it affects our quality of life. Number two, it affects all of our relationships, including, if you're in a partner, if you have a partner, including your relationship with your partner, but also your friends and people at work. And then the third, of course, which is the main reason we're here, is for our kids and how it impacts our kids. And so we really want to do some deep thinking and some deep work around that, because then we become more effective in all our relationships and as a guide, being a safe, trustable guide to our kids. I remember when my kid was young, a friend of mine told me, Vivek, you want to live your life so that your kid will admire you. And I always thought, wow, okay, well, what does that mean? That means I have to think about that. How does that relate to, like, who do I admire and what are the qualities of people that I admire, and try and embody that. And I certainly didn't want to pass on my emotional repression to my kid, right? So let's look at a few of the things that from our past that create our childhood, our emotions in the present, that create how we relate to our emotions, especially the part of us that has negative emotions. I don't really mean negative, but like maybe a challenging relationship to our emotions and painful emotions and things like that. So let's look at some of the things that come from, especially from our childhood. So number one is childhood trauma. And like I said before, it's not an excuse, but it is understanding the causes. And I find that the more understand, one of the reasons I think a lot and I research things a lot is I find that when I have more understanding of how things work, it gives me more capacity. It gives me more empowerment. And that's what I want. I want to be more empowered in my life. I want to be able to make more conscious choices and not just run on automatic. I call it the difference between imposed and chose. I don't want my thoughts and feelings and reactions to be imposed. I want them to be chose. And the journey from imposed to chose is not easy. It requires a lot of work and repatterning stuff that's inside of us. And for me, like every time I notice, like, I make a conscious choice, I celebrate it. I'm like, wow, okay, Vivek, you weren't operating from patterns there. That's amazing. So our childhood trauma, and can come in so many forms, and so from like really intense trauma to micro traumas all the way along. And that's why they're saying death by 1,000 paper cuts. Like you can have like micro traumas that add up because every experience that we have builds layers. For example, how we were treated around mistakes is a big one. When I make mistakes as a kid, I was always shamed for it and criticized for it and punished for it and put down for it. My dad, even if I got 98% on a test, my dad's only comment would ever be, "What happened to the other 2%?" And so my relationship with mistakes is pretty toxic, and I certainly didn't want to pass that on to my kids. So I knew I had to start to rewire how I treated myself when I made mistakes. And it's not something that happens automatically. It's something that I had to work on over years and years. And still I stress about it sometimes, but compared to how it used to be, it's so much better. Another thing is conditional acceptance, the idea that we're accepted conditionally by our parents and not unconditionally. And so this is something that's really important, especially as parents and wanting to shift those cycles for our kids. Things like criticism, consequences, punishment, and rewards. All those kind of things. The saying that I have is the message of all punishment, consequences, and rewards is I love you more when you act like this, and I love you less when you act like that. I accept you more when you act like this, and I accept you less when you act like that. And instead of seeing all of these life experiences as something that we can learn from and grow from, they become something that we have to like be afraid of, or we have to criticize ourselves, and we take on that criticism, and it affects our self-esteem, it affects our self-image. So all that stuff connects to how we see ourselves and our relationship to our emotions and just our life in general as adults. Another thing is school. School can be so harsh for a lot of people. Things like the challenging social interactions that we have, both with the adults who are authority figures and telling us that you have to sit there and act like this and think this and learn this way, and then punishing us if we're out of line. And then things like grades, where if you didn't get good grades, you're not as good. It's obvious you're not as good a person if you don't get good grades. You know, that whole thing, those things impact us in so many ways. And then criticism from teachers. And then when we're interacting with kids, we're getting all of the other kids. We're getting their families' mindset impacting us. You know, I noticed that with my kid. When she would come home, she would have the impact and the residue of all the kids and all the teachers and everybody that was impacting her throughout the day. And so much of my work after school was undoing. I called it school self-defense because I was having to undo so much of the residue that happened to her when she was at school. And even little criticisms can stay with us for a long time and affect how we see things. I remember I was in an art class. I was never really good at art. Now I actually can draw really well, but I was never very good at art when I was young. And I remember I was in this art class and I was making this pottery thing, and we all had to make these little bowls. And the teacher told me that they were going to put it in the display case. At the end of the class, they said, "Oh, Vivek, I really like your thing. I'm going to put it in the display case." And then they actually I've all these years I've kept it. This is the bowl that I made back when I was in grade seven. And she said to me, "I'm not putting it in the display case because I like the way it looks. I'm only putting it in there first because of the color." Well, she didn't have to say that to me. What the hell, right? She didn't have to tell me why she wasn't putting it in. Just telling me why she was enough. But I kept this all these years as a reminder for myself about how I wanted to talk to my kid. Because I mean, yeah, the thing is kind of grungy looking. Look at that. But it's got a nice red to it. So like maybe she had a point. But I'm 57 years old and I still remember the emotional impact that that had when I was a kid. And so layer after layer after layer, these things build up in us over time. And then if we're wired differently, like maybe some of us were neurodivergent or we process things in a different way, and we weren't given accommodation and respect for that, and we were just punished and criticized for that, and just for being who we are. That's such a challenge. And then not only our experiences as kids, but our experiences as adults and older teens and adults, all throughout our lives affects us, like our adult relationships, our work relationships, our friendships, our romantic relationships, especially if there's challenging ones that can be really hard. Life obstacles that we go through and the challenges that impacts us so deeply, and some of the things, and maybe it's financial obstacles, maybe it's health obstacles. There's so many different things that we go through. And all of these things impact our being, our state of being. And the more that we understand all of these causes, the more it helps us in actually being able to shift the patterns, like I said before, from imposed to chose, so that we can start to make more conscious choices about how we want to engage in the world and how we treat ourselves. It's such a big thing. Because for me, this is a lot of the work that I do on myself is to increase my quality of life. Not only my quality of life, but also for my family. Because I mean, yes, money and a house and food on the table is an important part of quality of life. But the day-to-day relationships and the atmosphere in our home and the way that we interact with each other, that's the memories that our kids really hold on to. Like when my kid was growing up, we had very little money a lot of the time. We even went through some years where friends had to help us buy groceries every month because we couldn't afford it. Really challenging, and there's a lot of shame in that as well. But we focus so much on the relationship in our family and the the connection in our family, creating it so that our kid would always feel cared for and connected and respected. that now she's going to be 29, and the memories that she has of her childhood are, for the most part, so beautiful, and the fact that we had to say no to her for so many things because that she wanted to buy because we didn't have the money for it. That's not the thing that stayed with her the most. It was our relationship that stayed with her the most. So the work that we do on ourselves, and I just want to say right off the bat, well, I guess it's not off the bat, I've already started, but I just want to say that the fact that you all are here coming to listen to this stuff and wanting to do this kind of deep work, it shows how much you care about your families and about their quality of life and about parenting in a way that will really empower your kids. And that, because I often say parents are memory makers, and that's another thing. Like the positive memories that we have from our childhood impact us as well. Like my dad, most of my memories of my dad are not positive, but there are a few moments that where he was kind of stepped out of his patterns. Like I remember the very first time I went to a concert, he took me, and this was in the 80s, I think in the 80s, and I was a big fan of the Stray Cats, and I went to their concert here in Toronto, and I remember thinking my dad wasn't criticizing it the whole time. Like he criticized everything I was interested in, but he wasn't criticizing this concert, and it was so strange for me. I was like, why isn't he criticizing me, and why isn't he criticizing the concert? Even just that he took me to the concert was something. But then at one point he goes, "Wow, these guys are masters of their instruments," like with real, genuine like admiration. And it just, again, I'm 57, and I remember this 40 years later, right? More than 40 years later, 45 years later, I remember that moment because for me it was like, wow, he's actually into something I'm into. He's actually accepting something I'm accepting and embracing something I love. And it had such an impact on me. It was like a drop of water when I'm dying of thirst in a desert, and I held on to it, and it had such an impact on me. I was like, okay, maybe my interests aren't crap after all. Maybe there is something valuable in me. And so, when I say that we're memory makers, this is a really powerful thing that every interaction we have with our kids has an impact on them. And so the more work that we do on ourselves, the more the more we can really help our kids have those kind of memories and help them with their own self-image. So we're talking about emotional work here. So let's talk about what emotional wellness is and how we can look at it in a way that gives us a kind of a framework um, for being emotionally stable. So there's three emotionally stable. I don't know, maybe not stable, but at least having a conscious working relationship with our emotions. So there's three main words that I use when I think of emotional wellness. And I actually teach a workshop called Supporting Our Children's Emotional Wellness. And it's the same kind of work for ourselves. And the three words are stable, sustainable, and resilient. It's those three things primarily. Stable means it's a strong foundation. It's like if we build a beautiful building, you know the analogy, if we build a beautiful building, but it doesn't have a stable foundation, even if it looks gorgeous and even if it's functional, a little bit of adversity and it's going to fall over, right? So we want something that's really stable. Now, repression obviously isn't stable. Criticizing our emotions obviously isn't stable. These things aren't stable. If we can accept all of our emotions, that creates a stability. If we can understand how they work and learn to work with them, that creates stability, right? And so that is one of the main things is are we stable? Stable doesn't mean it never changes. Stable doesn't mean we don't go through hard times, but stable means underlying all of that, there's a solid foundation. The second is sustainable. Sustainable means that we don't burn out all the time, that over the long haul, we have enough resources and energy that we can nourish ourselves, and we can recover when things are hard, which is actually the third one, resiliency. That we're able to be relatively consistent throughout the long term. Sustainability is important, and we can ignore when we ignore our needs, when we ignore ourselves, we're not sustainable. And there's so many times. And before I learned this, I would go through peaks and valleys of crashing and burning and climbing out, and then being okay for a while, crashing and burning and climbing out and being okay for a while. And then I was like, I don't really want to do that. I mean, a little bit is natural, but the big highs and lows is really challenging. And I wanted to find more ways that I could be more sustainable over the long term. Because then I'm more consistent with my kid. I'm more safe with them. They're easier for them to rely on me, like that. And the third is resiliency. Like I said, we're going to go through hard times. That's just part of life. But when we through hard times, do we have the tools and the skills and the understanding to come back to our center, to come back to a place of regulation, to come back to ourselves? It's adapting. It's not repression. It's adapting to difficult circumstances. And again, repression, it has its place. I don't want to say it doesn't have its place in the moment when we're about to yell at our kids and you can shut your mouth or run from the room. Actually, run it. When I talk about strategies, running from the room is one of the strategies I'm going to talk about. That's really helpful because we want to try not to yell at our kids. I mean, not all parents care about that, but I'm going to make an assumption that the people here actually do really care about that. And so, when we are able to find ways that when we do crash or we do have challenging times or when our emotions do become dysregulated, do we have the resilience and the tools to come back? Yeah, and that's so important. And that gives us, and we have, and part of that is having patience with ourselves and our process, being able to forgive ourselves, being able to be kind to ourselves, like all that kind of stuff. So stable, sustainable, and resilient. Those three words, they really help me because then when I'm thinking about my own emotional nature and what I'm going through, I'm thinking, well, how can I increase my stability? How can I increase my sustainability? How can I increase my resilience? And then it gives me things to work on. It gives me a direction to work on, which is really helpful. All right, so now we're going to look at, so just to recap. So I talked about the way that I talked about why processing emotions is important, largely because of how it impacts our quality of life with ourselves, impacts our relationships, all our adult relationships, and our relationships with our kids. And then, of course, the model that it sets and the impact it has on them as they're developing so that we're helping them become the most empowered beings that they can when they become adults. And then we look at the causes of it, so much from our childhood and how we weren't guided and we weren't taught a conscious relationship with our emotions, but in fact, a lot of the time, the opposite. And then we talked about emotional wellness and what the qualities of emotional wellness being stable, sustainable, and resilient. And so that's really powerful. So now we're going to look a little bit about different ways that we can actually work with our emotions. I just want to say, first of all, I'm not a therapist. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a so-called expert. Everything that I share with you really has come from my own experience and from many years of coaching and just having to dig through and the molasses or the desert landscape of my own challenging emotions so that I could be the kind of parent that I wanted to be to my kid and the kind of partner to my wife and the kind of friend I wanted to be to my friends and my relationship with my mom. My mom was really sick for a long time, and I was her full-time caretaker for quite a long time before she passed away about 9 months ago. And I wanted to be a good son to her. Like all these relationships are so important to me. I wanted to give my best to it. And yeah. And so learning how to work with our emotions is so important. So I'm going to mention a few different things that really help me, and I hope they're going to help you too. So one of them is what I call NAF. NAF is notice, accept, and feel. So the first is learning to notice our feelings. And this is something that, if we don't have a lot of experience in, just that alone is something that can radically change your relationship with your emotions, just practicing noticing them. Because a lot of the time before we even notice them, we have a habit of shoving them down. Especially if we have judgments around it. And so this is actually a skill that we can practice and learn. So noticing our feelings, noticing our emotions when they come up, which requires being self-aware, right? Being kind of like internally self-aware. We're like, it's good to be aware of what's happening around us, but being aware of what's happening inside this, bag of bones and meat and electrical impulses. It's really worthwhile for me. It's something that really helps us to have more empowerment, have more self-awareness. So I just said self-awareness helps us have more self-awareness, but it's true. And so it's a learning, it's a skill. But the thing is, it's a skill, like all the things I'm going to share with you, it's a skill that takes practice. Just hearing about it in a workshop or reading about it in a book is not enough to get good at it. There's the old saying, you can't learn to swim from reading a book. You probably can learn to swim like a little bit from reading a book. You move your arms like this, but you can't become really good at it until you get in the water and really practice. I myself studied martial arts for many, many years. I started in 1988. And I remember after I had been practicing and teaching martial arts for 18 years, I met the person that was going to become my next teacher. And I went to this workshop in New York because I heard, oh, there's this guy that's doing the same martial art as me, but he's doing it in a totally different way. And everybody was like excited about him. I said, okay, I'm going to go see him. So a few of us from Toronto, we crossed the border and went to New York, and we went to this weekend seminar. And I remember from the very first technique that he did, it was some sword technique. You know, I've got my swords even here with me in my living room. And from the very first technique he did, my mind was blown. I had never seen anyone move like that with the precision and the grace and the power. I was like, wow, I need to study with this guy. So after the workshop was over, it was a 3-day workshop. After the workshop was over, I went to him. I said, I really want to be your student. I want to study with you. He said, I don't just take anybody. He said, if you want to be my student, you have to bring me to Toronto host me for a workshop, and then we'll talk about it then. And I'll give you a private lesson, and we'll talk about it then. He said, but I'm going to give you something to practice. He said, I want you to invite me after a year, but I'm going to give you something to practice. And I wanted you to practice it every single day for the next year. And if you don't, I'm going to know it because I'm going to know what I'm going to see it in your body. And it was just 2 steps. It was a side step and a back step. But he gave me so many details where my knees had to be, where my back had to be, where my arms had to be, where my shoulder had to be, where my head had to be, and the timing and the pace and the angle and everything. And I had all these lines of masking tape on my floor, and I had a journal where I would mark it off. And I practiced so hard because I knew that if I didn't, that this guy wouldn't accept me as a student. And after a year of practicing this, and he came to Toronto, he was like, "Okay, I can see you practiced, and I'll take you on as my student." I studied with him for 10 years, and including trips to Japan and all sorts of stuff. It was really amazing. His name's, by the way, if you want to look him up on YouTube, his name is Kasem Zugari, and he's quite a beautiful mover. And there's a saying in the martial arts that goes, the first 1,000 hours are for mastery, and the next 10,000 hours are for refinement. And so practice never ends, right? Practice never ends. Even the great grandmasters, they're always still practicing. And I love that idea of refinement, that I'm always deepening my practice. I'm always learning. And it's the same with our emotions. So the first step is noticing our emotions. It's NAF, notice, accept, feel. So the next one is accepting all of our emotions without shame, without judgment, without criticism. Now that's a hard one because for a lot of us, we have that criticism pre-installed from our childhood, pre-installed from society's expectations and all the stuff that we talked about, right? And so reworking that stuff is really challenging. So one of the things is when you feel something and you notice the thought or the feeling of judgment or criticism, I shouldn't feel that. Just take a moment and breathe into the feeling and say, no, I'm going to accept this feeling. It's part of my humanity. It's part of who I am. It actually gives me more strength. It gives me more power. It's not a weakness. We're sold this lie over and over again that it's weakness to be emotional. Like when I express anything about emotions online, the number of men that come out and call me names in the comment sections, I'm not even going to repeat them here, but it's like an unending supply. And I'm like, if only you folks knew the power of reclaiming ourselves, our true selves, you know. So that's accepting. And the last one is feeling our feelings. And this is something that's really, really hard because accepting means I'm letting them in without judgment, but feeling them means being able to really sit and allow ourselves to feel them emotionally, feel them physically in our body. You know, like the other day, somebody wrote a comment on one of my posts that was very critical. And it was somebody I know, it was somebody who's a follower. And so I took it really personally. And I actually agreed with them. I thought they made a good point. And so, but they made it really harshly. And so I didn't argue. I just said, okay, thank you for the feedback because you know, that's part of my practice. I try not to reflexively argue, but I felt terrible. I felt so criticized. And I wanted to push those feelings away. I kept saying, no, I don't, it doesn't make sense. I don't need to feel those things. Nah. And I just kept pushing them away. And then like a day later, I was like, Vivek, that's not what you teach. I was like, Vivek, stop. So I stopped. I wanted to run from those feelings because they don't feel comfortable, right? But it takes a certain amount of courage to sit in the discomfort of these things. Right? Change is uncomfortable, Sitting with our emotions is uncomfortable, and it takes courage to be able to sit with discomfort. So I closed my eyes and I was like, okay, I felt criticized. It's like my dad, oh my gosh, it was like my dad criticizing me, making me feel like I'm not good enough. And I try so hard and I make one error on one word on one post and I get criticized for it. Fuck that. No, no, no. The person had a good point, but still, it felt terrible. It just felt terrible. So then I allowed myself to feel terrible. And by doing that, I was able to give myself kindness for it and empathy for it. And I was able to move it through my system so it didn't lock in the residue. Why? Because that residue leaks out on my other relationships. That residue leaks out in my quality of life. And I don't want that. I know enough now, having done this enough over the years, I know that that's not what I want. And so I was able to do that. And what did I do? So I gave myself empathy, which means I held space for that feeling. And this is something that I want to offer as a practice also, that empathizing means holding space and reflecting what it is that you feel. And same with other people when we reflect back what they feel. And really giving myself acknowledgement for that feeling, as well as allowing myself to physically really sit in the feeling. And there's something beautiful about that because, again, like then the emotions don't get stuck. And it helps us in accepting our emotion and not judging ourselves for it. And it helps us, by extension, do that for our kids, so that uh, we're not passing on those same cycles. And then after all that's finished, you notice it, you accept it, you feel it, and then you offer empathy and compassion for it. Then we have an opportunity to learn from it. And this is where so much of our empowerment comes in. I often ask when I have that kind of feeling, I'll say, like, what message do you have for me? What message do you have for me? What is it that I need to pay attention to? What is it that how can I grow from this? Maybe it means I need to learn setting boundaries more. Maybe it means I need to be more kind to myself. Maybe it means I need to shift something in my life. Maybe it means there's something in one of my relationships that needs to shift. Maybe there's some way I'm thinking about things that where there's an error in my thinking, and I want to deepen my understanding. There's like so many options so many opportunities for us to learn. Um, but if you go straight to just trying to analyze, then you haven't given yourself a chance to really feel it first, and it's more intellectual. I like the intellectual stuff to come at the end of the process. So I've allowed the physical expression, because emotions are a physical thing, right? It's the nervous system and the neuron system that activate and fire off things, and then we feel the emotions. Whatever the whatever like I always find this amazing. I've been thinking about this stuff for a decade, and I still don't get it. We're a neuron system and a nervous system with bones and muscles walking around and an energy system too, right? And a circulatory system. And so when the neurons fire and there's an emotional response, there's still a me that feels it. What is that consciousness? What is that me? I don't really know. But I feel it, you know, and so like I want to really allow myself that whole expression. And so like when I have fear or anger, for example, that's one of the hardest ones for me to acknowledge because I have so many anger issues. Like I talked about this in the last workshop too, when I was in my 20s, if somebody cut me off while I was driving, I would chase after them all afternoon and terrorize them. I was so angry. I would drive into oncoming traffic so I wouldn't lose them. Like this is how angry I was when I was, and so much of the bullying that I went through as a kid, bullied at home and bullied at school. I was beat up every day when I was in junior high school. All that anger got deeply into my system. You know, when I became like 15 and I knew my dad couldn't hit me anymore and I knew the bullies couldn't bully me anymore, all that rage that was repressed all those years came out and I ended up with living a life of violence and crime and aggression for many years. And I'm just fortunate that I didn't end up in prison or worse throughout the years with all the stuff that I got into. And I don't know if I mentioned that I haven't since COVID because they don't allow volunteers. But prior to COVID, for a decade, I was going to a prison every week and doing self-empowerment workshops in prisons with my mom, actually. She and I would do them together. And when I would tell my story, the guys always said that's exactly my experience too. You know, it was really something. And so my fear and anger is something that I knew I had to get some handle on when I was young because I didn't when my kid was young because I didn't want to keep projecting that on her. And so one of the things that I had to do with that anger was I couldn't just repress it. That wasn't sustainable, right? It wasn't sustainable. What I said, stable, sustainable, and resilient. So I had to really acknowledge my anger and my fear too, which I judge myself a lot for having fear. Even this morning, I was writing in my journal, Vivek, you need to face your fear. And so my fear and anger, instead of judging them, I acknowledge them and I empathize with them. I say, it's okay that you feel anger. It's okay that you feel fear. These are natural human emotions, Vivek. Don't push them away. Try not to project them onto others. That's why I say no repression, no projection. No repression, no projection. So I don't want to repress. I want to still feel them and have a conscious relationship, but I don't want to be projecting it onto others. I want to recognize that anger comes from a real place, a genuine place. And then I ask them, I say, listen, in this moment, this is not the time for you. I ask them to step aside, you know, and I said, like if I'm in the middle of conversation with my kid or working through something with my kid, or maybe they're just threw a Hot Wheels car at my head, and I've got like I've got a big red mark where the Hot Wheels car hit my temple. That's a good moment to say, okay, my anger is welling up inside of me. I'm gonna say, what the hell did you do that for? And I'm just gonna say, hey, your anger is valid, but just step aside for a moment. I want to deal with my kid with compassion so that they don't fear me for them making a mistake. And so yeah, so learning to accept, to notice, accept, and feel, and empathize and learn. These are the basic steps for working with our emotions as they come up. And yeah, so that's one thing. That's one thing. So I'm going to go on to another one now, another kind of strategy. And this is something I call PP, which is an acronym, PEE. It's one of my favorite acronyms because it's silly, but also it stands for pre-event empathy and post-event empathy. Pre-event empathy is when you know you're going to go into a difficult situation, especially with your kids, because we're largely talking about parenting here and working with young people. You know you're going to go into a difficult situation, and you give yourself empathy for the potential feelings you're going to have and acknowledgement ahead of time. So that when you go in, it's not a shock to your system. You're already prepared. You've already created a buffer system so that you can, so that you don't react. And then post-event empathy is when, and we're going to talk some more detail about how to do this, is when you do have a difficult emotion, how can you release the residue? And we're going to talk about a few different ways to release that residue. But there was this parent who called me, and her and her 15-year-old had this big fight, and the 15-year-old slammed the door, went into their room, and then she called me. She's like, Vivek, I want to go make amends with my kid. I feel bad that I yelled at her, and I know I made her angry. What do I do? And we talked about it for a while, and she decided she was going to go up and apologize. And she got her favorite movie, and she made some popcorn. She said, "Why don't we connect, and we'll watch your favorite movie, and we'll have a nice evening together." And I'm really sorry. I said, "Okay, but she's 15 and she's angry. So when you go up there, she might just tell you to fuck off. And if she does tell you that, you're going to get activated, and you're going to get angry, and then you're going to react, and then it's just going to make it's just going to make it worse." So I said, instead, take a moment before you go up there. And this is where the first P of PP comes in, the pre-event empathy. I said, just in your mind, visualize this. And this is something you can do for yourselves with your kids in different situations. Visualize yourself going up, and you open the door, and with your heart completely open, you apologize and you say, "Hey, I want to say sorry. I didn't mean to yell at you. I wish I hadn't. I rather would have taken a breath and really listened to you. And I'm sorry. And I got your favorite movie, and you made some popcorn. I'd love to spend time together." And then imagine that your kid goes, "Get the fuck out of here. I don't want to say anything. I don't want to see you." And then you get upset. And then in your imagination, give yourself empathy for it. Calm your nervous system. Give them empathy. It's understandable that they were doing it that way. And it hurts you. Of course it hurts because it touches on your childhood stuff. And just give yourself real feelings for it. So she did this, and then she went up. And she opened the door, and she did the apology to her kid. Her kid, exactly as I predicted, told her to F off, because I know teenagers, and told her to F off. It didn't have enough time to process. And she said, "Oh, okay, thank you for telling me. I really appreciate it. I can see you're still upset. It's perfectly reasonable. I'm gonna go. If you want to come down and watch the movie with me, whatever, I'm here." And she left. And she messaged me, and I was like, "Well, how was it for you?" She said, "You know what? I didn't get upset because I was expecting it, because I had already given myself kindness for that reaction, even though it hadn't happened yet. And I was cool." And like an hour later, the kid came down and they hugged and they watched the movie together and they had popcorn and the whole thing, right? Because the kid had their own time to find their way. Because the apology did take time to land and they felt the sincerity of it. They just couldn't handle it in the moment. And so pre-event empathy is really, 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 really useful. And so yeah, so I offer that to you. It's really great. And you can just remember it by saying PP, which is kind of silly. All right, we're gonna move on. I've got just a few more. Oh, geez, I've got quite a bit more. Okay. Anyway, we're gonna keep going. So I wanted to give you a lot of information. You can't necessarily, it doesn't make sense to try and remember it all. The replay will be available, and I will send out a summary of the information as well. I'm going to do that for the first workshop as well, so that you'll be able to look back through the notes and remember. But it's also good to make notes on things that you want to remember, what the things that stand out for you. But I want to give you a bunch of different strategies that you can use, and the ones that really resonate with you, you can make a note of, and you can start practicing them right away. Because all of these things you can practice right away. You can even practice while we're doing the workshop. Anyway, so the next one is about processing difficult memories when they come up. And I want to give an example. And this is something that I do that really helps me with rewiring my nervous system from stuff that's buried in the past. So this story is from a couple of years ago, but it's still something I practice. So one thing is, a couple of years ago, I was watching some show on TV, and this memory came back to me all of a sudden of this time when I was like 10 years old and I was in the shower. And my dad and like two uncles and four neighbors or something, like there was like six guys, men, just came into the bathroom, didn't knock, and started like bustling around looking at the pipes underneath the sink or something, some kind of plumbing thing. And I screamed, I said, "Hey, I'm in here. Get out, get out." Because I was embarrassed. And my dad said, "Oh, it's all men. It's all men. It's all men. It's all men." That was it. I didn't know what, at 10 years old, I did not know what that meant. I had no idea. All I knew was I was embarrassed and I told them to get out and they didn't listen to me. And I just had to stand there and like terrified, with all these men bustling around and, and just wait. And just I don't know, the fear and the shame and the embarrassment and not being respected, all that stuff. Like there was so many layers to that experience that I could see impact how I live my life and how I respond to things and how I feel about things even now. So what I decided I'm not going to ignore this. I need to deal with this. So I did some visualization, and here's what I did. And I'm going to share with you, and you can modify this for your own. If something like this that you have a memory from childhood that you want to do this kind of work on, this is a way that you can do it. So the first thing I did was I imagined myself, I'm in the shower, and my dad and all the uncles bust in. My family's from India, so all the friends and family, whether they're uncles or not, we just call them uncles. So my dad and all the uncles bust in, and they say it's all men, and they ignore me. And then adult Vivek, me, I bust into the bathroom and I say to these guys, "Didn't you just hear what Vivek said? He said get out." And then I started shoving them all out and I made them all get out. And I shut them out and I said, "Hey Vivek, you're safe now. I'm going to stand at the door and protect the door so nobody comes in. You're safe." And then I shut the door and I stood outside with my arms crossed looking at these guys like, "What the hell are you doing?" Right? And then so that was the first level. There's a few levels to this that I did. That was the first level. Then what I did, I ran through that same scenario again with them busting in, with me coming in, but this time I was the 10-year-old, and I stayed as the 10-year-old, and I experienced the safety of Vivek, adult Vivek, coming in and shoving these guys out and being protected, which I almost never was as a child. And I allowed myself to really feel that sense of being protected and being worth being protected and having my respect worth being honored. Then I did it. So for each one of these variations, I did it first as the adult, then as little Vivek receiving it. So I'm not going to mention that every time. I'll just give you the different iterations. The second time, um, the um, the second time when they started to open the door before they could get in, and just as Vivek is screaming, "No, get out!" I intercept them before they could even get in, and I stop them from going in, and I shove them out. and I say, "Get the hell out." And I'm really forceful. In this particular case, I felt like I really needed to be forceful. Get the hell out. I said, Vivek, they're not coming in. Don't worry about it. And so and then when I played the Vivek character, I didn't have the same level of shock. I was able to stay more relaxed. The little Vivek. Third time through, I intercepted them before they got to the door. I was already standing there, and I said, "No, you're not going in. What are you even thinking about?" Right? And so I was able to intercept them, and then little Vivek never had the shock at all. And then in the fourth one, when they came over, I started to talk to them. I said, "Listen, you people need to respect little Vivek more." And I gave them a whole talk about it. I said, "You weren't respected, and I actually did gave like a little workshop to them and helped them heal their own little inner child and help them understand the importance." Because I wished I had someone that could have told my parents these things when I was young. But I was that for myself. And and then finally, after all of that, little Vivek comes out of his shower, and the two of us are talking, and I'm able to give him some really positive, empowering affirmations. Say, "Little Vivek, I love you. You are always safe with me, and I'll always be here to protect you. You are free to play and explore and be your true self with me, because I'm always here and I accept you as you are." And that whole process, you know what I'm thinking about? That whole process is so beautiful, and it shifts our nervous system reactions to buried memories when we can do that kind of work. Now, you may have to alter that a little bit for yourself, but yeah, it's so beautiful when we do that. And I remember this, I'm thinking I remember this experience with the teacher telling me, "Oh, I'm going to put it in the display case, but not because of how it looks, only because of the color." And I can do that. I can do that for this too. I haven't actually, now that I'm thinking about it, because this pissed me off too. It still pisses me off. And I could do it for that too, and now that I'm thinking about it, I was like, okay, wait a minute, Vivek. There's a whole list of memories from your childhood that you could. Sounds like parts work. Somebody said, yes, it's very much like that. It's very much like that. And I kind of had to invent my own version of parts work and IFS because I didn't know anything about that when my kid. I mean, it's also in the '90s. I don't even know if that existed anywhere, and there was no internet, anyways. So in many ways, I had to invent all this stuff. So this is the kind of stuff you can do for this is the kind of stuff you can do for yeah, for processing your own memories. And it's beautiful because it gives you so much power to work with your own thoughts and your own feelings inside yourself. All right. I'm going to talk about something else now. This is something called, I think this is pretty much the last, yeah, this is the last major thing that I want to talk about. And this is something called residue reduction. Residue reduction is, and I talked like little bits about it already in the last little while, but I want to go into a little bit more detailed ideas of how you can actually do it. So residue reduction is when things build up in our nervous system and our emotions, how can we release it so that it doesn't stay stuck? How can we work with it and release it so it doesn't stay stuck? There's a beautiful analogy that I love called the watermelon elastic band analogy. And if you haven't done it, go to YouTube at some point and type in watermelon elastic band. And you'll see these videos of people taking a full-size watermelon and they put an elastic band on it. Now nothing's going to happen. It's just one elastic band. But they put more and more and more until there's 2, 3, 4, 500 elastic bands. And it's like this thick with elastic band. And then one last elastic band goes on, and the pressure is so big, the whole thing explodes. Now, if you don't see all of the elastic bands and you only see the last elastic band, you would think it's a disproportionate explosion. How can it happen, right? And we see that with our kids all the time. Our kids have elastic bands building up all the time. And when they have a disproportionate reaction because they don't get the red cup, they get the blue cup, and they scream, we think, oh, it's an unreasonable thing. But we don't see all the elastic bands underneath. I also call it iceberg consciousness. We don't see under the iceberg all the different things that have built up to contribute to that. But I love the watermelon because you can actually go on YouTube and see these watermelons explode. And actually, I have a video on my YouTube channel, which is Meaningful Ideas, by the way. If you type in Meaningful Ideas and my name, Vivek Patel, you'll find my YouTube channel. And I have over 230 videos on my YouTube channel. Some of them are really short, 2, 3, 4 minutes, and some of them are full 2-hour workshops like this one. And so if you go onto the YouTube channel, you'll see one of them is called Exploding Watermelons. And then I actually put one of the images of the watermelon exploding there, and I explain this. But the idea is something I call elastic band management. So instead of ignoring those elastic bands as they're building up, we can offload them as we notice them, and it's so useful and so helpful. With my kid, when she would come home from school, one of the things I did was when she would come home, I would have an obstacle course set up. So the first thing that she did when she got home was she had to go through an obstacle course. She had to climb over this and over that and shake this and jump that and throw this and punch that. And she got a lot of stuff out of her nervous system right off the bat. So for me, same thing. I want to be able to work with my body and my mind. So we're going to go through a few different residue reduction ideas. And of course, like I keep saying this over and over, but I think it's important for us to really have a clear understanding of that part of the reason we're doing this is we don't want that residue to leak out on our kids. We don't want it to leak out on our other relationships. It's so important. This is part of taking responsibility for ourselves, you know. And again, responsibility doesn't mean we're unkind to ourselves. It doesn't mean we repress. It means we work consciously with our stuff so it doesn't leak out. All right. So one of the things is I mentioned notice your feelings, but we can also like notice the physical expression of our feelings. Like where do we feel it in our body? And again, for a lot of us, we might be disconnected from our bodies because we weren't raised to have a deep connection to our body. You know, as a martial artist and a dancer, because I do both, I was so conscious of having my kid have a deep, very, very conscious relationship with their body. So they know what was going on in there. They can feel it. Because in so many ways I didn't have that and I had to reclaim it, you know. And so one of the ways we can do that is when you do feel something, can you feel where it is in your body? And when you can locate where it is, it might be more than one place. Maybe your shoulders get tense. Maybe you have butterflies in your solar plexus. I have butterflies a lot. I call them butterflies with teeth. Maybe your temples get sore. Maybe your lower back, something, right? Um, and so when you can notice it, then you can take a moment and you can breathe into it. You can touch it. Like I often rub my belly because of those butterflies with teeth. People ask me, "Oh, Vivek, you have a stomach ache?" I said, "No, I'm just rubbing the butterflies," and they all laugh at me. And but I'm often giving love to my butterfly-filled stomach. It's the nervousness, it's fear, it's shame, whatever it is. And over the shoulders, you can like just hold them for a moment and really put your attention on the physical expression of your emotions. It can really be something, you know, massage, touched, or maybe even moving. I don't know if you're open to moving, maybe you can move the part of your body around that feels that and let that energy out. Maybe you can shake it, you know, shake it, or maybe you can like activate the nervous system in that area with like tapping or slapping or this kind of thing or rubbing them, like all these things. When I do workshops, one of the workshops I do with kids is called Leadership Through Movement, and I do dance and martial art games, and then we talk about leadership and how it relates to leadership. And then one of the things I do for the warm up is I get them to slap their whole body, and I say, slap your head, now slap your shoulders, now slap your belly, now slap your legs, and I go, now slap your butt, and they all laugh and scream with laughter. So but yeah, like doing that kind of thing can like really release so much of the unprocessed stuff from our nervous system. Another thing is sounding, like letting out a big sound. You can scream into your pillow. This is when I said run. One of the things that I would do when my kid was young, when I would feel like emotion building up and I was about to yell at her, I was like, no, Vivek, do not yell at your kid. So sometimes I would yell out loud, run, Vivek, run. And I would run out of the room. I would shut the door in my bedroom. Now that would freak her out because all of a sudden I was gone. But better than yelling at her. Sometimes I had to make a choice between the two. And I would go in and I would scream into the pillow. Do I have the pillow here? I'd scream into the pillow and I go, and I would really let it out. That pillow saw a lot of action, let me tell you. And then I was able to like shake it off. And then I would go into the bathroom and I put cold water on my face, which is another one. Like you can put ice on your face or cold water on your shoulders or your back or your neck or an ice pack on your neck even can shift your whole nervous system and your feelings. If you study something like polyvagal theory, which I haven't studied a lot, but there's a whole like series of exercises and things you can do to to um to rebalance your nervous system. But then I put water on my face. Then I go out to my kid, you know, a minute later, and I go, "Oh, this is a really hard moment, my dear. Let's work through it together." And I was able to do that instead of yell, you know, and that's so much better. Um, if you have something you can punch. Like I have a punching bag in my bedroom. I got an apartment size punching bag, which is like just like 2.5 feet. And I have it like strapped to a stand, and I'll just like put on some gloves, and I'll just punch this thing, and it just releases all this intensity from my nervous system. Sometimes just taking a pause and taking a deep breath and really breathing deep into my like opening up my diaphragm and really taking a deep breath can make a difference. I have something called the micro meditation, which is a one breath meditation. One breath meditation is really powerful because, like I said, it's just one breath. And so like I'm doing something and I notice maybe some tension coming into me. Sometimes if we can notice the elastic bands early, we can head them off early before they blow up, right? And so then I'm going to go, okay, I need a micro meditation. I'll just stop. By the way, I have a micro meditation video on my YouTube as well, so check that out. And I'll just stop and I'll go, and then I'll go on, and then I'll go on. And it's not sitting in lotus position with incense and candles for 30 minutes. It's one breath, right? Maybe we can try that together. If you're into it, try it with me right now. Let's just close our eyes and just notice your body for a moment, where you're sitting, where your body is touching the surfaces of the chair and the floor. And let's just take a deep breath together. And we're breathing all the time, right? And then we can let it go, right? And that's a beautiful thing about micro practices. I have another workshop that I'm going to be sharing soon called Micro Practices for the Busy, Stressed Out Parent. And this is one of the main ones, is the micro meditation. And it's different. Having a taking a conscious breath is different. We're breathing all the time, but taking a conscious breath is a whole different thing. Another thing you can do is like put your hands over your eyes and really press into your eyes. This is like really, really can be really calming. And plus it kind of blocks out the world also. So this is really nice. Or you can like hug yourself and really give a squeeze. There was this time not too long ago, maybe like a month ago, where I was driving. I was going to pick up my wife from work, and and I was at a stoplight, and this old woman knocks on my window of my car, and she says, and I rolled down the window. She said, "Excuse me, Sonny, but I'm not sure where I'm supposed to be. I'm lost. Can you help me?" I was like, "What's going on?" She said, "Well, I asked the public transit office where to get to my doctor's office, and they told me that I was supposed to be able to walk there from here, but I don't see it anywhere." I said, "Where is it?" And she told me the intersection. I was like, "You're nowhere near there." Like either they gave you the wrong directions or you heard the wrong direction. She goes, "Well, I don't know what to do." I said, get in and I'll drive you." So I put the address into my GPS and we're driving. And she said, "Oh, thank you so much for this. It really means a lot." And she said, I'm your booby now. I'm your grandmother now." She said, "I'm going to be your booby. I'm going to be your grandmother." And I said, "Oh, thank you. That's lovely." And so we had this like beautiful conversation. She was telling me about her life. I was telling her about my mom, who, like I said, passed away, and we were just having a nice conversation. Then all of a sudden she had this panic attack. And she started to kind of like freak out. And she was like, she was started to do this. "Oh, I'm going to be late. I can't believe they gave me the wrong directions. I can't believe." And she started to freak out. And I said, "Listen," I kind of did a little pattern interruption. She said, "Listen, hold on, wait." She goes, "What?" I said, when you get really stressed like that, your nervous system is on fire. That's what's happening. Did you know that?" She goes, "No, I didn't know that." I said, "One of the best things you can do in that moment is cover your eyes like this." I said, "But I'm not going to do it because I'm driving." And then she laughed a little bit. I said, "But cover your eyes and hold it really tight and take a deep breath." So she covered her eyes and she went, and I said, "The other thing you can do is hug yourself." She goes, "You hug yourself?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "I've never hugged myself." I said, "Try." She's 91, by the way. She said, "I've never tried that before." So she hugged herself. I said, "Now take another deep breath." And she just relaxed and all the tension just flowed out of her. She said, "Wow, that really worked." I said, "Yeah." So then like 5 minutes later, we're still driving to her dentist appointment, right? So she had to get a tooth out or something. And then we're driving and like 5 minutes later, we're at a stoplight and the person in front of me is not making a left turn and they have so many opportunities and my brain is starting to get fried because I just can't stand that and I'm losing my patience because I already mentioned anger issues better than it used to be, but still I still have to deal with it all the time. And I start honking at the person, right? And then she put her hand on my shoulder and said, "Sonny, just hug yourself and take a breath. You don't want to get angry." And she threw it right back at me. I love that. I said, "Oh, you're right. You're right. You're right, Bubby. Thank you so much." And she gave, and I gave myself a hug. And she said, "No, you don't need to get angry. You don't need to get angry." I said, "You're right. You're right." and did that. So I love that story. I think that it was and it was so sweet that she remembered it. All right. So going on. So the other thing is you can start to, like when I talked about, so then I just talked about a whole bunch of physical things you can do to release the energy, right? Another thing is mindset stuff. You can start to think about where, like I said, what message do you have for me? Can you learn from it, right? So start to really think about it. Where did it come from? What can I learn from this? What are my values? What are my principles? What do I care about? What's important to me? And what are my goals? And start to really think about that kind of stuff in a deep way, questioning your beliefs and questioning your thoughts and questioning your assumptions about things. Like this kind of work, all doing a lot, and I do that. You can either do that through journaling or just thinking through things. I spend a lot of time just walking around my apartment thinking. You can talk with friends, all these there's so many different ways. If you have access to therapy, but I mean, a lot of people don't, but if you do, that's a good option. So yeah, there's like lots of different ways that you can do a lot of deep thinking because I find that, again, thinking is important. It helps us understand things more and help us give more direction to things. And then we can do things with our consciousness, which is like meditation or mindfulness and some kind of mindfulness practice. There's so many. I'm not even gonna I'm not even gonna share any in this case. Find some meditation that works for you. But like if you go onto YouTube and you just type in mindfulness meditation, you'll get 10,000 options and you can find something that works for you. But I gave you we talked about the micro meditation, but find a meditation, some kind of meditation practice. It can be a walking meditation, it can be a movement meditation, it can be a stillness meditation, it can be a mantra, it can be a visualization, but some kind of mindfulness can really, really help. All right. Now we're coming towards the end. Now, one thing that I want to repeat that I mentioned before, and this is one of the most important parts of all of this work and all of the parenting work that I teach and all the parenting work that I practice, because I'm still practicing every day. Having a 29-year-old doesn't mean that the journey is over. We're still deeply connected. Is self-compassion. It's one of the most important parts. When we have, and I'm like a broken record when I talk about this because I talk about it all the time. But self-compassion, it allows us to deepen our learning because if we don't have shame and we don't have blame, then instead of focusing on the shame and blame, we can focus on the learning and the growth. And this is a beautiful, empowering thing. And I don't think of self-compassion as like a woo thing or a airy fairy thing, wishy-washy thing. I think of it like a discipline. I think of it like push-ups. I think of it like diet. I think of it like medicine. It's that important. It's that liberating. It's that empowering. So one of the things that I do is I set an alarm on my phone. You can get an app where you can set your own alarm sound, and I actually make a voice note of myself, and then I have myself once an hour or so. The voice note will play, and I'll say something like, "You are a good person with a loving heart. You care deeply, and I believe in you. I know life can be challenging sometimes, but I know you have the courage to keep going even when things are hard." I'll say something like that to myself as an alarm. And once an hour, I hear myself say that. I'm like, oh, okay, thank you. Thank you very much for that. That's like the kind of thing that I do. And one of my acronyms is FECK, FECK, which stands for forgiveness, empathy, compassion, and kindness. And I say, go feck yourself every day. And then I'll say, oh, feck me. And it makes me laugh, but also it reminds me forgiveness. I want to forgive myself when I'm out of alignment, when I make a mistake, when I do something. So I'm not carrying the heavy shame and blame. Empathy, I want to hold space for my emotions. Compassion, I want to have understanding that I'm human and life is hard and give myself grace. And kindness, I want to watch how I talk to myself. I don't want those imposed scripts playing in my head all the time. I want to counter them with my scripts, my chosen things that I want to say to myself. And I don't want to operate from scripts. I don't want to operate from imposed voices. I want to treat myself kindly. And so that is something that's really powerful. And this kind of work, it puts us on a lifelong learning journey, a lifelong growth journey. I always say, don't think of yourself as a good parent or a bad parent. Think of yourself as an evolving parent. And every day I try and learn something. Every night, it's something I call the daily grind. At the end of the day, I evaluate my day and I think about what did I do well? What could I have done differently? What can I learn from it? And then and I give myself compassion for it. And then in the morning, I make a goal to learn something. I'm going to yell 10% less. I'm going to give myself more compassion. And then I put that on repeat. Every day I evaluate. Every morning I I have some kind of goal that I want to work on, and I'm just really conscious with myself. And as you're going through this process of like deepening your own self-awareness and your own growth and your own evolution and your own parenting, especially because that's why we're here. Because we want to change the cycles and parent our kids in a way that empowers them in ways that we never got. Have patience with yourself and don't give up. This is the most important thing because it's not always going to be easy. It's rarely going to be easy, but it's worthwhile the work that we do. And so that's it, everybody. That's what I want to share with you today. We talked about the causes. We talked about different ways of dealing with it. I talked about accepting our emotions and working with the body and the mind and the feelings. And so I want to encourage you, if you haven't already, to follow me on social media. My social media is Meaningful Ideas everywhere. My YouTube channel, like I said, has so many videos on it, over 200 videos on it. And if you just go through that, it's radically life-changing. And then on my Facebook page, I have hundreds of articles that I've written on my Facebook page. If you go to the search function, you can type in any parenting concept, and you'll get tons of articles and videos on my Facebook page. And my website is meaningfulideas.com, where I have a free course called Guiding Without Controlling, which is a wonderful course. It's a 40-minute video, and people tell me they go back to it over and over and over again because it's so deep. And I also have a membership group where people pay a monthly fee, and I go live every week, just like this, talking about a different aspect of parenting. The parenting style that I teach, I came up with my own name for it because it's quite unique. It's called non-coercive collaborative parenting, which is shortened to NCCP. Non-coercive because we don't use force on our kids, collaborative because we're always trying to work with them. So non-coercive collaborative parenting, and I talk about all sorts of things, recovering after yelling, working with our emotions like we did today, but specific things like transition and bedtime and positive relationship with food and how to guide our kids. And there's like so many things. And all the replays are available to everyone. And that way you can, engage with me live like this every week. And there's always time for questions afterwards. And that's it, everybody. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to stay here and be open and listen. And I appreciate all of you and the hard work that you're doing.
Outstanding. That really was. It was one of the quickest hours I've had in a long time. That was brilliant, Vivek. I
Thank you
really
so
appreciate it.
much.
I'm going to stop the recording.
Actually, before you
Taylor.
do, I just want to
Yep.
really thank you and Suzanne and Trauma Informed Parenting for inviting me to do this. And I just love all the work that you folks do. You help so many people, and the courses that you offer are absolutely outstanding. And I really appreciate you folks. I'm glad that we're
No,
associated
I
like we are.
appreciate that. Absolutely.